Sometimes we forget just how disturbing our present really is. It's easy to make a video about which movie predicted artificial intelligence, but what you're about to see goes far beyond that. We're going to talk about directors who looked at the present and saw a deranged future. Movies that, when they were released, seemed like exaggerated dramas or impossible dystopias, but that today are your fucking reality. I'm talking about directors who, decades before TikTok, Tinder, or cancel culture even existed, already knew that the individual would be torn apart to appease the masses. That society would come to value aesthetic posturing above its own dignity, and that the world would not only forget about true love, but ridicule it and deny its very existence so that no one would aspire to be free. Let me warn you, what you're about to watch isn't here to entertain you. It's here to break you, so it can rebuild you from the ground up. Because the truth is always raw and merciless. And this isn't simply an analysis of science fiction. In fact, most of these works aren't science fiction at all. This is the autopsy of our present, filmed by visionaries who, long before we were even born, already knew exactly how we were going to lose our humanity. If there is one film that forces you to look around with pure paranoia, it is Brazil. Released in 1985 and directed by the genius Terry Gilliam, this masterpiece has always been sold as a black comedy. But watch it today, and you're watching our society. Everything in this film begins with the most absurd mistake imaginable. A fly falls into a typewriter, changes one letter in a surname, and causes the state to arrest, torture, and murder the wrong citizen. Instead of correcting the mistake, the system activates an infernal machine to cover it up, because paperwork, stamps, and bureaucracy matter more than human life. That absurdity is exactly the architecture of our present. We live trapped by faceless digital procedures, collapsing government websites, and automated processes where bureaucracy has replaced human empathy. The system ignores you, classifies you, or destroys you because of one incorrectly checked box on a screen. But the real knockout is the way it predicted corporate euphemism. Institutional gaslighting. In the film, the department responsible for kidnapping, torturing, and executing innocent citizens is called the Ministry of Information Retrieval. It is an exact blueprint for the doublespeak we suffer every day. They no longer steal your privacy. They improve your user experience. Or take things like co-living, which is just a pretty way of normalizing the fact that you can't afford to rent an apartment on your own and have to share a kitchen and bathroom with 3 strangers. And on top of that, there are the 2 mental prophecies that were absolutely marginal in their time and are now a pandemic. First, the democratization of body dysmorphia. Scenes of wealthy women competing to see who has the best surgeon, normalizing distorted bandaged faces as they stretch their skin, are a reflection of the age of Botox, hypersexualization, and social media filters. And second, extreme dissociation. There is a brutal scene where a bomb explodes in a luxury restaurant, and the diners simply put up a screen to hide the corpses and carry on eating. That's the modern user watching a war unfold live on their screen, swiping away and laughing at a meme. That's being dead inside. The protagonist of Brazil, trapped inside a suffocating cubicle, needed to escape into a virtual avatar within his own dreams so he wouldn't go insane. Just like the average citizen today, who retreats into the endless scroll so they don't have to think. But the film fell short. Its protagonist dissociated through idealism, reconnecting with himself. Now people dissociate by forgetting who the fuck they are, anesthetized by apps that rot their brains. Brazil shows you that when the system empties you out from the inside, you eventually accept horror as part of the scenery.
You can't have babies! Don't you oppress me. I'm not oppressing you, Stam. You haven't got a womb!
I know it sounds like a joke, and I wish it were, but unfortunately, Life of Brian is already real. This masterpiece is one of the most brutal and prophetic sociological analyses in the history of cinema. They weren't satirizing the past, they were drawing the exact blueprint of the collective pathologies we suffer from today, here in the 21st century. The Pythons wrote jokes that seemed like the pinnacle of absurdist humor in their day, but today they are, quite literally, the evening news. The film's most precise and chilling prediction is the deconstruction of reality in favor of identity dogma. In the iconic scene where the militant Stan demands to be called Loretta because he feels like a woman and wants to have babies, his comrades remind him that it is biologically impossible. But the group's leader ends the debate with a line that makes you shudder today. Let's not fight about reality. Let's fight for his right to give birth. In 1979, this was colossal absurdity. Today, it is an exact reflection of a society that would rather mutilate the truth in order to validate individual ego and appease the group's false morality. They predicted an era in which the religion of the self would become the new spirituality in disguise. But look at this. In the film, there is an absurd war between the People's Front of Judea and the Judean People's Front. Groups with the exact same ideology who hate each other to death over nothing but technicalities. They anticipated cancel culture, a crowd so obsessed with the moral purity of its own side that it ends up hunting down and destroying anyone who thinks even 1% differently. And the final punchline is the paradox of the sheep mentality we live with every day. Brian leans out of the window and shouts at the crowd,
"You've got to think for yourselves! You're all individuals!"
And the entire crowd responds in unison,
"Yes, we're all individuals!"
They nailed our mentality today. People think they're free because they have rejected spirituality, love, and transcendence. But the soul is still there, and if you deny it, it will come back in the form of ideology or dogma. They repeat whatever slogans are fashionable on TikTok or Twitter in order to fit in with the supposedly right-thinking herd, proving that the crowd always behaves the same way, suppressing individual sanity in exchange for the comfort of the herd. If there is one film that managed to portray the decay of the human spirit long before it actually happened, it is La Dolce Vita. Released in 1960 and directed by the master Federico Fellini, this work of art is the birth certificate of the Society of the Spectacle and an exact prophecy about the death of the modern soul. The film opens with one of the most powerful and blasphemous images in cinema history, a statue of Jesus Christ hanging from a helicopter flying over Rome. Christ moves forward, blessing the ancient rooftops, and eventually, a group of women in bikinis sunbathing on a terrace, while the pilots ask them for their phone numbers from the air. In those 3 minutes, Fellini summarizes the next 70 years of history. The end of transcendence, the desacralization of the sacred, and the birth of a world that has forgotten what it is. He filmed this in a profoundly spiritual era, when faith still structured society. He wasn't portraying what was happening, but the exact prophecy of what would come afterward. The soul of the West was being orphaned of spirituality, ready to be devoured by the void. The director warned us before anyone else. When human beings rip the divine out of their lives, they don't become freer. They become profoundly superficial, desperate, and grotesque. And that's where Marcello comes in, a journalist trapped in an endless loop of parties, alcohol, and beautiful faces. Fellini literally invented the term paparazzi, announcing the plague of the media circus that would come decades later. In the 1960s, stardom required genuine talent and was protected by the respect of the industry. Scandal destroyed careers. It didn't create them. La Dolce Vita shattered that model by inventing the celebrity who is famous for being famous. Fellini understood that street harassment would mutate into a pack willing to trample on people's pain and privacy in pursuit of mass consumption. The director thus portrayed people devoid of any body of work but ravenous for attention, prophesying the birth of influencers, staged photo ops, and reality television. He also predicted the collapse of serious journalism. Marcello begins wanting to become a great intellectual writer and ends up destroyed by the muck of tabloid journalism. Fellini predicted that garbage content would devour real information. We see it in the scene where television turns 2 children who claim to have seen the Virgin Mary into a gigantic circus, or when reporters corner the widow to photograph her reaction live. He anticipated clickbait, voyeurism, and sensationalist journalism. And La Dolce Vita predicted with surgical precision that once human beings had everything they could possibly want materially, they would fall into a crisis of apathy and existential emptiness. The people who populate the film's parties are rich, beautiful, and have access to luxury, art, and music, yet they carry a soulless sadness with them. Nothing fulfills them. What was once an affliction exclusive to the upper classes is now suffered by absolutely everyone. Through our phones, through narratives that reduce human beings to mere biology, and through sex turned into simple friction without love, they have depressed an entire population, slipping a lie into people's minds to keep them addicted and cynical. We've always been sold Blade Runner as the pinnacle of cyberpunk aesthetics, flying cars, neon lights, and industrial rain. But the real nightmare Ridley Scott filmed in 1982 is buried inside the skulls of his androids. This is the dirtiest mirror of what is happening to our sanity today. The replicants spend the entire film suffering because they don't know whether their memories are real or whether a corporation implanted them in their heads to make them docile and productive. They think about a childhood that never existed so they can endure slave labor. And that's the film's psychological gut punch. That's exactly what your mind is like right now. We are so thoroughly colonized by internet narratives, constant scrolling, and the prefabricated desires of algorithms that it has become impossible to know what is genuine within us. That trip you want to take, those clothes you buy, or that goal you're pursuing, do they actually come from you? Or were they injected into your mind by a marketing department through a screen? We have anesthetized the soul behind the social mask. We've forgotten what actually brings happiness and infinite pleasure, and replaced it with garbage designed to feed the ego. Scott saw that governments would become irrelevant in the future. The world would belong to gigantic corporations capable of controlling every last drop of your attention. He nailed that urban landscape where invasive screens follow you down the street and advertisements dictate how you're supposed to feel. But what is truly chilling is the death of empathy. In this universe, the robots are the only ones who cry, the only ones who feel rage, and the ones who cling to life with a savage mysticism. Humans, meanwhile, have become gray, apathetic, mechanical beings. Look at our times. This is the age of extreme detachment, where we struggle to look the person sitting next to us on the subway in the eye, yet we overstimulate ourselves with the artificial lives of a handful of strangers. Blade Runner didn't predict the future of machines. It predicted how the system would hollow out our souls until we became the fucking tin cans ourselves. If you told someone in the 90s that a Sylvester Stallone action comedy would become the exact blueprint for our society, they would have laughed in your face. But Demolition Man accidentally became the instruction manual for all our current pathologies. The film drops you into a hyper-clean future where society has eradicated violence by stripping the human being of his soul. The most direct example is that machine on the wall that automatically fines you every time you use an inappropriate word for verbal morality violations. At the time, it seemed like a joke. Today, it's our life. It's society banning words or assigning you to an ideological camp simply because of one sentence. It's the social media algorithm censoring you, deleting your video, or banning your account if you stray even a millimeter outside what is politically correct. We live under invisible surveillance where the crowd imposes a digital gag on you in the name of not offending anyone. And from there comes the film's most destructive prophecy, the absolute infantilization of society. We see citizens who speak in childish tones, mentally collapse at the slightest hint of conflict, and demand to live inside hyper-protected bubbles. It's the culture of fragility we see today, where people are incapable of tolerating a hard debate or an opposing opinion. The irony is that at the same time, we've killed the inner child. We've exterminated genuine sensitivity, that capacity to be amazed by life, by reality, and by the sacred, and replaced it with pure victimhood. It's fucking astonishing to see how the same person who claims to be hyper-fragile and gets offended by a single word is also the same person who consumes pornography as if it were nothing, coldly jumps from one bed to another, or watches videos of real human tragedies without even blinking. They laugh at the intrinsic morality of human beings, but they've invented a morality of their own where their damn ego comes before anyone else's soul, even their own. To make matters worse, physical contact has been eliminated in this world. Hugs and real sex are banned as unhygienic. Instead, people use virtual helmets to connect without touching. It's a prophecy of how people today are terrified of the friction of the real world, so we replace the intensity of genuine romance with sanitized interactions through apps. This is how we see just how easily people can surrender their freedom, their flesh, and their passion in exchange for a fake safe space. In the 80s, Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro released The King of Comedy, provoking the rejection of an audience that found it uncomfortable and disturbing. While mainstream cinema of the era portrayed success as the product of talent and hard work, this film detected the seed of our present: the pathological obsession with being seen, narcissism, and the total erosion of dignity in exchange for 15 seconds of attention. Rupert Pupkin is a mediocre man, with no talent, no sense of humor, and no intelligence to speak of. Yet he becomes a millionaire simply because he kidnaps a talk show host to perform a monologue about his traumatic childhood and his own crime. What Scorsese couldn't possibly have anticipated is that Rupert, in his day, was an exaggerated parody. Today, the average influencer is even worse. You don't need to kidnap anyone anymore. You can prostitute your own dignity and everyone else's in 15 seconds and go viral. Or simply find a way to hook people with empty content. Look no further than our modern Rupert Pupkin, Mr. Beast. A guy with no charisma, who isn't particularly intelligent, and who became famous by counting to 100,000 in front of a camera. From there, in a neurotic fashion, he began analyzing how to capture people's brains using aggressive thumbnails and endless stimulation. And that's how he built an empire with hundreds of millions of subscribers, rotting an entire generation's attention with content designed exclusively to make you addicted. On top of that, Pupkin spends his nights in his basement, talking to himself in front of cardboard cutouts of television celebrities. He rehearses imaginary dinners with them and convinces himself that they're his closest friends. It's exactly the parasocial psychology that now overwhelms social media. Millions of lonely people in their bedrooms, consuming 24 hours of some guy's life through a screen, believing they have a real connection with someone who doesn't even know they exist. Pupkin knows that his monologue will send him straight to prison, but he doesn't give a damn. He would rather have a cell than be invisible. The film ends with a line that sends a chill down your spine today. It's better to be king for a night than a nobody for a lifetime. Now the game is humiliating yourself live, selling your breakups, pretending to have a certain life, or destroying your own privacy just to scrape together a handful of views. The modern ego would rather face punishment or public hatred than indifference. Because when a culture abandons love and transcendence, it eventually turns its most dangerous lunatics into its new moral authorities. Forget screens, algorithms, and social media. All of those are merely symptoms of a much deeper disease. The true ground zero of our destruction, the absolute record for cinematic prophecy, was delivered by Michelangelo Antonioni in 1962 with L'Eclisse. While the world celebrated the economic miracle of the 60s, this director saw something that was then marginal. He realized that we were losing our ability to feel because we had denied the heart, using money and quick pleasures to fill the hole. He calculated with mathematical precision how materialism would colonize the psyche until it left us internally anemic. The story follows two young people at the peak of their lives, played by Alain Delon and Monica Vitti. They're beautiful, free, wealthy, and have status, everything society tells you that you need to succeed. Yet they carry such suffocating existential apathy that it's frightening. Delon's character is literally the prototype of the modern guy obsessed with money, business, and luxury. His mind is so dominated by the stock market and profit that he has excised every trace of empathy. There's a brutal scene where the market crashes and a man loses everything. Delon's only concern is how to start speculating again the very next second. That's the contemporary mentality. Beings hyper-efficient for the machinery of work, but emotionally illiterate in intimacy. An ego that understands only the language of individual profit. Meanwhile, Monica Vitti's character perfectly embodies our society's mental health crisis. Back then, it was something more marginal, but Antonioni knew she was the woman of the future. Today, she's the average person. Someone who lives with that feeling of floating in nothingness, constantly changing environments, constantly seeking stimulation, because your soul is incapable of feeling a single gram of genuine dopamine. It's the existential disorientation that comes from killing transcendence and trying to replace it with garbage that will never fill the void. The clash between them is the mirror of relationships today. There is attraction and impeccable flirtation, but there is no true love, because love cannot be manufactured. And instead of honestly accepting that emptiness, society does what they do: use the other person's body as a patch to numb loneliness. And this is where the most destructive premonition in the history of cinema occurs. The exact blueprint for ghosting and emotional disconnection, filmed 50 years before dating apps even existed. At the end of the film, the protagonists say goodbye, swear that they love each other, and promise to meet at a street corner at a specific time. But when the moment arrives, the screen remains empty. Neither of them shows up. They become invisible to one another, because deep down, they knew they were only using each other as consumer goods. For 7 minutes of deathly silence, the camera shows us the empty street corner, the concrete, and the streetlights coming on in the night. Antonioni captured the exact moment when we stopped seeing the other person as a sacred soul and started treating them as a disposable commodity. And we've been sold the idea that love is an act of will, a contract, or a label. But real romance is your everything. It is that mystical state in which the ego completely dissolves and temptation ceases to exist because you're already experiencing the highest form of pleasure. Antonioni filmed the way the modern world destroys the conditions necessary for that miracle to happen. My intention with this video isn't to depress you, but quite the opposite. I want to use cinema as a mirror so you can see the trap we're caught in, and finally, choose to truly live. If you enjoyed this video, you have to watch my analysis of how modern cinema destroys your psyche. It's such an uncomfortable video that the algorithm decided to censor it and limit its reach. Watch it at your own risk. It's going to shake you from the inside, but it's the necessary step toward healing. Thank you for listening. If you value the continued existence of genuine content in a sea of empty stimulation, a good like and a subscription are the only way to show the system that there are still sane people out here. See you very soon.